I'm shaking so violently as I write this that I can barely hold my phone steady. My name is Emma, I'm 24, and 3 years ago, my identical twin sister Claire died in a devastating car accident on Highway 101 during a thunderstorm. At least, that's what I believed until yesterday when I found her supposedly destroyed phone hidden in our childhood bedroom and discovered text messages that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Claire and I were inseparable growing up in our small Oregon town. We had that weird telepathic twin connection everyone talks about, but nobody really believes until they see it, finishing each other's sentences, feeling each other's physical pain across distances, sharing identical dreams down to the smallest details. We even had our own secret language that drove our parents crazy. When she died in that mangled wreckage on a rainy October night, part of my soul died with her. The funeral was closed casket because of the horrific severity of the accident. Her body was supposedly burned beyond recognition. I never got to say goodbye properly, never got closure, never got to tell her I loved her one last time. But here's where this story takes a turn that defies all logic and sanity. For the past 3 years, I've been receiving text messages from an unknown number with a 541 area code. Always between 2 and 4 a.m., always cryptic, but somehow perfectly relevant to my life. Always knowing exactly what I needed to hear during my darkest, most desperate moments. Messages like, Emma, don't give up on art school. You're meant to be there. When I was literally filling out withdrawal paperwork. Or, Mom needs you to call her right now. Something's wrong with her heart. Just hours before she had her massive heart attack last year that would have killed her if I hadn't insisted she go to the hospital. I assumed it was some kind of grief counselor who had gotten my number from the funeral home, or maybe a close friend who was too shy or awkward to reveal their true identity. The messages were always unsigned, never personal enough to identify the sender, and when I tried calling the number back, it always went straight to a generic disconnected voicemail message. I was honestly grateful for the mysterious support during my healing process, even though I had no idea who was behind it. Yesterday morning, I was helping my parents clear out decades of accumulated junk from storage boxes in our childhood home before they moved to their retirement place in Florida. In the very back of our shared bedroom closet, behind a loose floorboard that Claire and I used to hide our secret diary entries and stolen candy, I found Claire's rose gold iPhone in a waterproof case. The exact same phone that was supposedly completely destroyed and incinerated in the crash 3 years ago. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely hold the charging cable steady as I plugged it into the wall. When the phone finally powered on after 3 years of being dead, I nearly collapsed from shock. The phone showed hundreds and hundreds of outgoing text messages to my number, dating from the day after her funeral until exactly 1 week ago. Every single mysterious, life-saving message I'd received over the past 3 years had come directly from Claire's supposedly destroyed phone. But that revelation was just the beginning of this nightmare. The messages weren't just random supportive texts from beyond the grave. Reading through them chronologically, I realized with growing horror that Claire had been actively watching me, somehow gaining intimate knowledge about my daily life, my private struggles, my secret relationships, my personal fears that I'd never shared with another living soul. She knew when I started dating Marcus 2 months before I told anyone in our family. She knew about my pregnancy scare last month that I hadn't even shared with my closest friend Jessica. She knew about my panic attacks, my eating disorder, my financial problems, my work drama, everything. One text message from exactly 6 months ago read, Emma, don't trust Marcus Chin. Check his laptop tomorrow while he's at his CrossFit class. Password is his mother's maiden name plus 2019. You need to see what he's been hiding from you. I had completely ignored that message at the time, dismissing it as paranoid advice from my mysterious guardian angel who seemed overly protective. But now, reading it on Claire's actual phone, I remembered that the next day I had randomly decided to use Marcus's laptop to check my email and found active dating profiles he'd been maintaining throughout our entire relationship. We broke up that same week when I confronted him with screenshots. How could Claire have possibly known about Marcus's cheating when she was supposed to be dead? How was she getting this impossibly specific information about my private life? I scrolled through more messages with increasing panic, and they became progressively more specific and seemingly impossible for a dead person to know. Emma, Dad's going to have severe chest pains next Tuesday around 3 p.m. Make absolutely sure he goes directly to the hospital emergency room, not just urgent care or his regular doctor. This is life or death. I received that exact text 2 weeks ago. Last Tuesday at 3:17 p.m., Dad started having chest pains while mowing the lawn, and something deep in my gut insisted we skip urgent care and go straight to the ER. The cardiologist told us later that if we'd waited even 1 hour longer for treatment, Dad would have died from a massive widowmaker heart attack. Another message from last month. The job interview at Morrison Graphics is Thursday at 2 p.m. sharp, not 3 p.m. like they told you in the email. They secretly moved it up to test punctuality and see who reads instructions carefully. Show up at the original time. I had shown up at 2 p.m. on a complete whim, thinking I was an hour early and could grab coffee while I waited. Instead, I discovered they had indeed moved the interview up as some kind of test, and I was the only candidate out of 12 who arrived on time. I got the job offer that same day, but the message that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins was sent just 3 days ago. Emma, I need you to know the truth, and I'm running out of time to tell you. I didn't die in that car accident 3 years ago. I've been trapped somewhere against my will, and I think someone in our immediate family knows exactly where I am and why I'm being held. Check the basement of Uncle Richard's old cabin in the mountains. Look for the hidden room behind the water heater. There are things I need you to find before it's too late for both of us. Uncle Richard had been dead for 5 years from a supposed heart attack. His remote mountain cabin had been sitting empty ever since, and the family had been unsuccessfully trying to sell it because the location was too isolated and frankly gave everyone the creeps with its dark history. I immediately called my mom and asked about Claire's phone in the most casual voice I could manage. She insisted with absolute certainty that it had been completely destroyed in the accident along with everything else in the car, incinerated beyond any possibility of recovery. When I casually mentioned Uncle Richard's cabin and asked if anyone had been up there recently, she got strangely quiet and quickly changed the subject to talking about their moving plans. That night, I couldn't sleep for even 5 minutes. I kept rereading Claire's messages over and over, and a horrifying pattern began to emerge that made me physically sick. Every single piece of future knowledge she had shared with me was specifically about preventing things that would hurt our family or put me in serious danger. It was like she was desperately trying to protect me from something terrible while being unable to ask for help directly. I made the decision that I had to drive to Uncle Richard's cabin, no matter how dangerous or crazy it seemed. I drove up there early this morning, my heart pounding violently during the entire 3-hour drive through winding mountain roads. The cabin looked exactly like I remembered from uncomfortable childhood visits, creepy, isolated, surrounded by dense forest that seemed to swallow sound. Using the spare key that we all knew was hidden under the third porch step, I let myself into the musty interior. The basement was exactly as terrifying as I expected. Musty, pitch dark, filled with cobwebs and that metallic smell of old pipes and decay. I found the ancient water heater in the corner and started carefully examining the concrete wall behind it with my phone's flashlight. That's when I discovered something that changed my understanding of everything. There was a hidden door, painted to match the wall perfectly, almost completely invisible unless you knew exactly where to look and what to feel for. It was secured with a heavy-duty padlock that looked much newer and more expensive than anything else in the basement. I used a rusty crowbar from Uncle Richard's toolbox to break the lock open, my hands shaking with adrenaline and terror. Behind the door was a small room, maybe 8 by 10 feet, with no windows and no ventilation. And inside that room was clear evidence that someone had been living there recently, possibly for a very long time. There was a mattress with rumpled blankets, empty food containers with recent expiration dates, a small camping toilet, and dozens of notebooks filled with handwriting I recognized immediately. It was definitely Claire's distinctive handwriting. I opened the first notebook with hands shaking so violently I could barely turn the pages. The entries were carefully dated, starting from 3 years ago, just days after her supposed death. Day 3. I don't know how long I've been unconscious, but I woke up in this concrete room with no memory of how I got here. Someone's been bringing me food and water while I sleep, but I never see who it is. They must drug the food because I always fall asleep right after eating. I can hear footsteps upstairs sometimes, pacing back and forth. The footsteps sound familiar, but I can't place them. I think I'm in Uncle Richard's cabin basement based on the smell and the sound of the old pipes. I remember being in the car accident during that terrible storm, but everything after that is completely fuzzy and terrifying. Day 15. I found an old iPhone hidden inside the wall behind a loose brick. It still works somehow, but I can only get a weak signal late at night between 2 to 4 a.m. when atmospheric conditions are just right. I've been trying to text Emma, but I don't know if the messages are actually getting through. I'm too terrified to risk calling because what if whoever's keeping me here hears me talking? Day 127. I think I'm starting to figure out who's been keeping me prisoner here, but I can't believe it's possible. I saw them through a crack in the door yesterday when they thought I was unconscious from the drugged food. It's impossible. It's someone we trust completely, someone who would never hurt us. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely turn the pages without tearing them. Day 891. Emma got the job at Morrison Graphics, just like I hoped she would. My messages are definitely reaching her, thank God. I've been trying to help her navigate her life from this prison, using the limited information I can gather. Sometimes I hear detailed phone conversations upstairs, and I piece together what's happening in her daily life. Whoever's keeping me here talks about our family constantly, obsessively. Day 1095. 3 years. It's been exactly 3 years since the staged accident. Emma thinks I'm dead. Everyone thinks I'm dead. But I'm not dead. I'm trapped in this nightmare, and I think I finally understand why I can never be allowed to leave. The next entry was dated just 1 week ago. I discovered something absolutely terrible about why I'm being kept alive. The person holding me prisoner isn't just some random kidnapper or psychopath. They staged my death because I found out about something they did, something that would completely destroy our family and send them to prison for life if it ever came out. I can't write the details here in case they read these notebooks, but I've been leaving Emma carefully coded clues in my text messages. She needs to figure out the truth before they realize I've been communicating with her and decide I'm too dangerous to keep alive. If someone finds these notebooks and I'm not here anymore, tell Emma to look in the place where we buried our childhood time capsule when we were 10 years old. Everything she needs to know is hidden there. The rest of the notebook was completely empty. I searched the entire hidden room frantically, looking under every surface, behind every object, but there was absolutely no sign of Claire. The food containers were at least several days old, the blankets were cold to the touch, and there was an overwhelming sense of recent abandonment that made me physically sick to my stomach. But I remembered exactly where we had buried our childhood time capsule 24 years ago. I drove straight back to our childhood home like a woman possessed, praying desperately that my parents hadn't already left for Florida. They were in the middle of loading their moving truck when I screeched into the driveway. I told them I needed to grab something sentimental from the backyard and ran directly to the massive old oak tree where Claire and I had buried a metal box filled with childhood treasures when we were 10 years old. I dug with my bare hands, dirt getting under my fingernails, until I hit something solid and metallic. Inside the box, along with our faded childhood photographs and handwritten letters to our future selves, was a USB drive that definitely had not been there 24 years ago. I plugged it into my laptop right there in the dirt under the oak tree, and what I found made me understand exactly why someone would want Claire dead and why they'd been keeping her prisoner for 3 years instead of just killing her outright. The USB contained hundreds of high-resolution photographs and official documents proving beyond any doubt that Uncle Richard hadn't died of natural causes 5 years ago like everyone believed. He had been brutally murdered, and the evidence clearly showed who had killed him and exactly why. It was my father. The documents revealed in horrifying detail that Uncle Richard had discovered Dad was systematically embezzling massive amounts of money from the family construction business, money that legally belonged to all the siblings, including Uncle Richard's share. When Richard threatened to expose the embezzlement and turn Dad in to the FBI, Dad killed him with digitalis poisoning and made it look like a natural heart attack. Claire had somehow discovered this evidence and was planning to turn Dad in to the authorities when she had her accident. But here's the part that's been making me physically sick for hours. If Dad has been keeping Claire prisoner for 3 years to prevent her from exposing his crimes, and if she's not in that hidden room anymore, where exactly is she now? And why did my parents seem so panicked and eager to suddenly move to Florida just days after Claire's last desperate text message? I'm sitting in my car outside their house right now, watching them load the final boxes into the moving truck. I can see Dad through the kitchen window, and he looks exactly like the loving, protective father who raised me and taught me to ride a bike. But I also know he's a cold-blooded murderer who's been keeping my sister prisoner for 3 years, letting me believe she was dead while she suffered in that basement room. I have 2 impossible choices: confront him directly and demand to know where Claire is, risking that he'll kill both of us to protect his secret, or call the police immediately with the evidence and hope they can find her before it's too late. But here's what's really terrifying me beyond words. What if Claire isn't just missing? What if Dad realized she'd been communicating with me through those text messages and decided she was too dangerous to keep alive anymore? What if I'm already too late to save her? I need to make a decision in the next few minutes because they're almost finished loading the truck, and once they leave for Florida, I might never see my sister again. What would you do in my situation? Would you confront a murderer who's also your father, knowing he's already killed twice to protect his secrets? Or would you trust the police to handle it and risk that he disappears forever with the truth about Claire? Because I can see him looking directly at me through the window right now, and something in his expression tells me he knows that I know everything.